Right, David Hastings. I'm a professor of marine science and chemistry here at Eckerd College.
All right, what can you tell us about this letter from scientists to Donald Trump?
Right. Well, we do know that Mr. Trump called climate change a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese, and he's denying the science of climate change. And as scientists, we're very concerned with that. We're concerned with facts, and he's clearly at odds and in contradiction with the facts of climate change.
What are the facts of climate change? Why should Floridians be concerned? Why should people who are voting in the presidential election be concerned about climate change?
Right. So I'll answer first why Floridians should be concerned about climate change. We're really ground zero for the impacts of climate change in Florida for a variety of different reasons. First of all, sea level rise. We know that the oceans are going to rise, and they are, and they will continue to do that. And that's going to obviously affect all our coastal towns and cities and places that we live and recreate. So that's going to affect it tremendously. Sea level rise. Sometimes we don't think about as much is that the water supplies, our freshwater drinking supplies, are going to be contaminated by this salt water that's rising. So we're going to have salinization of our drinking water, which is a huge concern. And then it keeps on adding in because we know the planet is warming, the oceans are warming, and hurricanes and bad storms come from the warm oceans. They only occur when we have warm oceans. So we know that as the ocean's temperature rises, we're going to get worse hurricanes. And if you combine bad hurricanes with sea level rise, we're talking about storm surge. And the recent Hurricane Matthew, we saw just remarkable storm surges that were unprecedented, 10 feet in some places. So there's that. The list goes on. If to cut it short, coral reefs, our beloved coral reefs, which is why our tourists come here to a large extent, they're going to die as temperatures rise and the oceans become more acidic. So there's lots of reasons for Floridians to be concerned. This is, if there's one state that that should really be concerned about climate change, impacts of climate change, it's Florida.
And you've had a conversation with Governor Rick Scott because you wrote him a similar letter. What was the response?
Right. So when Governor Rick Scott also was in denial of the science of climate change. And we just wanted to talk to him that this is, he said, I'm not a scientist, therefore I can't understand climate change. And we really don't believe that you need to be a scientist in order to understand both the cause of climate change and the impacts. It's fairly straightforward. We teach it to 18-year-olds all the time here at Eckerd College. So it's interesting, and there are complicated aspects of the science of climate change, but the fundamentals are pretty straightforward, and that is that it's happening. It's happening now. We are causing it. Scientists agree. It's happening quickly, more quickly than we thought, and the really good news is we can do something about it. And that's really what these conversations are about, is that we have choices every day, and especially in 2 weeks, about who we elect for president. And those choices are whether we choose somebody who denies the science of climate change or somebody who accepts it and has a clear plan to do something about it.
So aside from politics, what are some things that people can do besides voting? What are things that the country needs to do or that the next leader would need to do in order to control climate change?
You know, I'm going to answer a slightly different question. That you talked about politics, and that's not something that I think we need to, I don't want to appear political. We're really talking about the science of climate change and to deny or to accept the science. And I think it's unfortunate, and it's really not appropriate for this to be a political discussion, because this is whether something is true or not. It's whether the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening. This is a fact, and all of the reputable climate scientists agree that the climate is changing and that humans are responsible. What is political is what we decide to do about it. And I'm accepting of different approaches to how to deal with the impacts of climate change. But that's the politics, that's the policy. But what I'm suggesting is that we accept the science of climate change, because that's the reality, and all climate scientists who are reputable are accepting the science of climate change.
Let me ask you about something that's on the ballot, Amendment 1, which is a solar power amendment.
Right.
What does that have to do with climate change, let's say?
Right. Well, you talked about solutions to climate change. Obviously, there are a lot of solutions to climate change, and producing energy that's renewable, that isn't reliant on burning carbon and producing CO2 is extremely important. And one of those ways is to put solar on our houses, solar photovoltaic electricity. And Amendment 1 is worded in a very confusing way. It appears to be pro-solar, but in fact no solar industry supports it, and no environmental group who supports solar electricity supports it. So it's intentionally confusing. It looks that it's pro-solar, but it's actually not. It's an industry-sponsored amendment that makes it more difficult and more expensive for solar photovoltaic to come up on my roof, for example.
I think we went through all of my questions. Is there anything else people should know about climate change?
Yes, is the short answer. That there's lots to be concerned about climate change in this election. You know, we can talk about how Donald Trump is denying climate change, but I think it's also important to point out the candidates who are supporting climate change. Secretary Clinton clearly accepts the science of climate change, and she has a clear plan to address the concerns that scientists have. And that's why, as scientists, that we really see a positive light there in Secretary Clinton's proposals and plans, both to deal with the impacts of climate change and how to produce energy more sustainably. So we're very concerned about the anti-science rhetoric that's going on, and we're also very inspired by Secretary Clinton's plans.
Great, thanks so much for your time.
You bet.